Baya. We seek refuge and pay homage to the Supreme, Most High Creator, whom ordains and conducts all that exists and non-exists. Libation.
Ashe.
Nomo Pert Neteru Baya. We seek refuge and pay homage to the company of our ancestors who manifest the divine principles and laws and attributes of light and love and virtues of the Most High Creator. Libation.
Ashe.
Nomo Guru Baya. We seek refuge and pay homage to the gurus, saints, and Sufis and mystics from time memorial, for out of their immense love of humanity and the Dharma, who makes great tremendous sacrifices on our behalf for the sake of self, God realization. Not in this lifetime, not just in this lifetime, but for all our lifetimes. Libation.
Ashe.
Nomo Dharma Baya. We seek refuge in the teachings of the great realizers, Buddhas, spiritual masters in the depth, from time memorial and of our present time, and be as retainers of the gift of grace. Libation.
Ashe.
Nomo Sangha Baya. We seek refuge and pay homage to all of our spiritual communities across all time and space, in which give us the impetus, strength, and the courage and the help needed for the sake of God and self-realization, not just for our sake, but for the sake of all sentient beings and the like. Libation.
Ashe.
Nefermer, Hotep, Ma'at, Seba, Bhagwan, Afrika, Guru Mojabai, Ibae, Ashe, Hotep, my Lord, Hotep.
Song and message that said, Master, can you use me? I may not be the best in this or that, but whatever I can do, Master, can you use me? Come on, Jesse. Sing that for me.
Homage and prostration to Sadguru, who is Brahman and the giver of supreme bliss, who is Satpurush, the embodiment of supreme consciousness itself, one without a second, vaster than the sky, infinite, eternal, beyond all time, space, and causality, beyond the three gunas and their modification, the dispel of darkness and the bestower of light, the supreme preceptor, Namo Guru Bhaya. Ashikamat. So what would you rascals like to discuss today? Any particular topic?
Got a hand.
Yes, beloved.
Death.
Hmm?
Death.
Death.
My cousin died on Monday.
I beg pardon?
My cousin died on Monday.
Child. Well, you certainly chose a fitting topic considering where we're at. And of course, death is one of the great mysteries in the sense that even though we see people dying every day, all around us, but in spite of that, somehow or another, we still believe that we will not die, you see. And beloved, it is this presumption of immortality, of the sense of self that you are now clinging to, that blinds us to reality, that is all around us. You see. It is amazing how dull and dense we must be, that we cannot see something as glaringly real as death. It tends to indicate how profoundly ignorant we all are of the nature of reality. The death of a loved one, it has been said, is a particular grace that is given us, because in that moment, you see, death come close. And we are reminded in that moment that you too shall die. This is the lesson of death for all of us. It is to remind us again and again, you see, nobody lives here forever. And it is hopefully an opportunity to become sober. In Buddhism, Buddha was once asked, beloved, of all of his baskets of teachings that he has given over the course of his career. Buddha taught for 42 years, and he covered almost every aspect of those things that pertain to spirituality, enlightenment, etc. And toward the end of his ministry, one of his bhikkhus asked Tathagata, what is the greatest teachings of all of these teachings? You see, the niyamas, the pitaka, so forth and so on, the abhidhamma, all of the teachings that make up the various sutras that inform Buddhism. And the Buddha says that just as the footprint of the elephant is the greatest footprint that can be made, he says in the same way the teachings on death is his greatest teachings, you see. And ancient Kemet, Africa, if you ever have the occasion to visit there, you will see this lesson of death written everywhere. It's in the temples, in architectures, you see. It's in their stories and so forth and so on. Because this lesson is one of the fundamental lessons that you must get in life. You have to understand you're going to die. The you who you presume yourself to be, the you that you are clinging to. You see, that's mortal. That ends. And the ideal is not to create any kind of morbid consequences of that revelation, but it is to make you sober, you see, so that you prioritize your life and so forth and so on. So the teachings on death, beloved, is one of the most fundamental teachings on the teachings of reality. You see, these mystics in their depths, they come and they don't give us just philosophy and metaphysics and so forth and so on. What they're really giving us, beloved, is the teachings on reality. They're trying to help us somehow or another to see things as things really are. You follow me? But alas, we are blind, you see. Jesus says somewhere, we have eyes and you do not see. You have ears, you do not hear. You do not see or hear or come in contact with reality. Because people are dying, people are getting sick, all kinds of tragedies are going on around you, but you still persist in the false presumption that somehow or another that's not going to happen to you. Are you following me? This is the crux of the argument, you see? All this death and dying and sickness and illness and ups and downs and vicissitudes of life that you see going on around you, is going to happen to you. But the wonder is that you see all of this stuff and you continually presume this is not going to happen to you. This is avidya. This is ignorance. This is the ignorance that the saints come to try to help us overcome, you see. Now, much more can be said about it. But we will not try to bore the rest of the audience, you and I. We can always talk separately. Something else? Yes, beloved.
Kind of maybe a follow-up question. I mean, there's death, and then, and I'm not sure if I've heard it here or through one of your books or some of my other readings, but I've come across the saying that the secret to life is to die before you die. So, I mean, kind of I don't say a tag along, but similar to death, but
sure. In fact, that is one of the points that the saints emphasize, and it is the purpose of spiritual practice itself, is to learn how to die while living, you see. to get that business handled, because it's inevitable, you see. And again, if you can accept the reality of the eventual ending of what you call your life, the right reaction to that is to prepare yourself for that. So meditation then, beloved, becomes the practice of dying while living. And it gets to be very complex from that point on. But essentially, what you have repeated is what has been taught. One embarks on the spiritual path to fundamentally duplicate what will happen eventually in death, you see. In death, there's a return to source. So the ideal of meditation is to begin this process of the reversal of being back to its original source now, you see, while living. Rather than to find yourself in that predicament with no preparation for it. There's two things, beloved, that we fail to prepare ourselves for. One is life, and the other is death. These are our two greatest fears, a fear of life and a fear of death. What is the fear of life? The fear of life is that you're not going to be able to gratify your senses. The fear of life is that you will not be able to find the kind of pleasure that you are seeking in the objects, circumstances, situation, people, and places that makes up your predicament. Are you following my argument? You see? It's a tremendous fear. That fear of life is also very paradoxically the same kind of fear that you have of death. Because the fear of death is that I'm going to not be able to satisfy my sense impulses for the sake of their gratification. Are you with me? It's the same fear, just intersposed, you see? So this fear of life and fear of death is related to the fear of the loss of the opportunity to indulge our senses in these objects, circumstances, situations, people, places, and things, and thus experience pleasure. All of this is dealt with in the spiritual process. So it's not only about learning how to die while living in terms of preparing for death. It's the same thing. You learn how to live free from this chronic and near pathological pursuit of the gratification of one's senses with the objects of those senses. You see? That too is a kind of death. Are you with me? That too is a kind of futile ambition. So the lesson is twofold. One, you're going to die. Two, you're not going to find the happiness that you are seeking within the realm of this conditional reality in the form of your pursuits of objects of the senses for the sake of gratification. That's not going to happen. But this we don't see either, even though it's perfectly obvious, you see. We all have pursued this and that for the sake of pleasure, only to find that that pleasure does not last, and it disappears, you see. And the consequence then is that for every occasion where you gratify a pleasure, you also experience sorrow. Pleasure and sorrow are concomitant phenomena. So this you have to understand, you see. So the teachings on reality then involve the teachings on death and the teachings on happiness, because they're very similar. But yes, your question about dying while living is very accurate. This is what the saints and mystics and the adepts have come to give us knowledge of. Again, these subjects that you're raising today, these are very profound subjects, so I'm happy to see progress is being made. So much more can be said about it. But the similarity between both questions here is this. The problem you have with dying and the death of people, or the problems you will have, and your constant failure to make yourself happy are both rooted in ignorance. What the Hindu philosophers call avidya or ajnana, In Western philosophy and metaphysics, we call it nescience, ignorance. So perhaps we can have a little conversation about ignorance, the whole start of it, you see. Again, in Buddhism, there's a concept called paticca samuppada. Paticca samuppada simply means the chain of dependent origination. Every effect has a cause. Is that about right? And so in Buddhism, he traces out all of the details of that chain of cause and effect. Your suffering is an effect. What's the cause? You see? Every problem that we have is always the result of our ignorance. But ignorance of what? You see? And what is the chain reaction that follows logically, naturally, inevitably, once we have fallen into a state of ignorance? You see? Once we have fallen into a state of ignorance, that sets up a whole chain reaction, you see, and becomes the basis of all problems, all sorrow, all suffering. Rather than to just speak to you abstractly about it, put some questions before me, and maybe we can narrow this subject down, because this is Gabera, this is deep, this is profound. Buddha, saints, mystics spend their entire lifetime talking about just this one issue: how to help us overcome our ignorance. That's the meaning of the word Guru. Guru means light shining into darkness. The Guru give us teachings. They try to communicate knowledge to us to bring us out of this profound state of ignorance. As long as one persists in this state of ignorance, there is no possibility to be prepared for death, to find happiness, to resolve problems. None of that is possible at all, you see. Even your best effort at analytical thinking, even your analytical thinking comes out of your ignorance. Please try to understand this. You do all your deep thinking, you do all your studying, you reading, you pondering, but the basis of all of that is ignorance. So even when you read, you won't understand anything. Your ignorance will prohibit that. Very often you see in the tradition, that's why if you study these great scriptures, the Bhagavad Gitas, the Yoga Vasya, the Asravaka Gitas, etc., you see, you go to a guru to study that. You don't just pull a book off the shelf and start reading it. How would you understand anything? Your study itself is coming from a state of pure ignorance, you see? And all that will happen in your case, you will come away from that study misunderstanding everything, you see? And then you will try to apply this misunderstanding to life, and your misunderstanding is not going to solve any of your problems. Are you feeling me?
Yes, sir.
So you can't simply resort to your own so-called intelligence, because you have none. You are in a state of ignorance. You follow me? So even what you call your intelligence is just another form of your ignorance, you see? The trap that you're in is profound, you see? And one has to slowly begin to recognize that, you see? So this whole conversation we have requires us to deal with the foundation of all our fears, all our problems that have brought you through the door, you see? And that is your ignorance. You can stop me now. We haven't gone too far that we can't reverse and pick up another topic that is more pleasing. But perhaps we'll say a bit about the chain of effects that arises as a result of our initial state of ignorance. Okay. What do you think we are ignorant of that sets up the whole process that is suffering and sorrow? Okay. who's gonna control the audience out there? Okay, Anuka Sa, then Satsida, and then Sakyana, you moderate, okay?
Of who you really are?
All right, so there we already had it, so we can proceed straight ahead. This is the fundamental ignorance. The ignorance of who you really are is the basis for all suffering. You see, every form and aspect of it, you see, it is the basis for all sin. Sin meaning missing the mark, missing the point, off balance, out of touch with reality, you see. The saints and mystics tell us over and over again that you are just this pure consciousness itself, infinite, eternal, beyond all time, space, and causality, universal, everywhere present, permeating, vast, you see? But somehow or another, you have forgotten that. Somehow or another, you have lost awareness of this vastness of yourself, your consciousness, you see? And you have become identified with this body-mind complex as being yourself. This is ignorance. This is avidya. You see, avidya leads to what in the tradition is called asmita. Asmita is this sense of being a limited self. You see, from being a universal, infinite, omnipresent form of consciousness, you contract and you become limited consciousness. So avidya creates the experience you're having of being individuated units of consciousness. Are you with me? Each of you sitting there feel yourself to be a individuated unit of consciousness. This feeling of being individuated units of consciousness is the result of avidya and the loss of the awareness that you are not an individuated unit of consciousness. Psychologically, what I'm suggesting is that you're not an individual. Now, this is a terrible shock, because you are feeling that you are an individual and you're clinging to your individuality. Individuality is an illusion based on avidya. Try to follow this argument. This is sogayi. This is profound. This is gavira. This is deep. Because isn't that what we're doing? Isn't that one of the problems that we have when we come to the path? You see, the gurus are giving us instructions on how to do sadhana and so forth and so on, and these instructions is coming in conflict with our individuality. Is that about right? My individuality is at risk here. You see, what's going to happen if I do all this stuff? What's going to happen to what? Me. Is that about right? It's that me, you see. If I do all this meditation, I do all these things, what's going to happen to me? I'm not going to be able to live. You're confused in that moment because of this original act of avidya, the fall. Are you with me? From God consciousness to individuated, limited experience of being consciousness. Are you all following me? I just don't want to blah, 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 blah. You see? So if you have need to have this further clarified, you speak now or forever hold thy peace. You see? That's what satsanga is all about, you see, to come here and to get clear. So try to understand this. You see, the problem is this false sense of being a limited, individuated unit of consciousness, asmita. You see. Now, once asmita has happened, once you have felt the experience of being just this limited unit of consciousness, the next thing that occurs is the rise of ego, ahankara. Ego is born of this asmita, you see? Because not only is there the feeling of being this individuated unit of consciousness, now this individuated unit of consciousness falls a little further and become identified with the body-mind complex. Are you with me? The identification with the body-mind complex generate ahankara. This ahankara is this feeling of being totally separate, you see, from everything and everybody else. This is interesting because the universe is organic. You see, reality is organic. Everything is interconnected. Are you with me? But you feel you are separate and independent and not connected to anybody or anything else, not even nature. This is profound, don't you think? Don't you think?
Yes.
You see? You're doing what you call your thing, as if there's nothing else factor into the outcome of your doing your thing. You doing your thing is pure mythology, born of avidya, born of ignorance. You are not separate from anyone or anything. Ego is the false presumption of being a separate, independently existent, individuated unit of consciousness. Hence, ego becomes the problem, you see, that we first must confront, you see. And so the entire body of instructions and all of the practices, both formal and informal, is purpose to deal with this ego, you see, this ego. Now, this is very interesting because in spite of the fall, there's still something very deep down inside of you that seeks unity with the rest of things. This is interesting. On the one hand, you seek to be an individual, separate, independent of all things and all others. Then on the other hand, you seek to be in relationship with somebody or with something. Have you noticed that? Haven't you noticed that? Because there's something buried deep down inside of you that seeks unity with that which you presume to be separate. There's a kind of schizophrenia going on. Are you with me? It's kind of form of spiritual schizophrenia. On the one hand, you just want to be this independent, non-connected, separate, right, entity. And then you want somebody to love you. Wait a minute. If you are so independent and individuated, why you need somebody to love you? Why you even need love? What love got to do with it? But yet you feel you need somebody to love you. Now you say you're this independent, individuated unit of consciousness that is disconnected from everything and everything else. You exist independently of all of that. You see, this is your own ontological argument, you see. But then you need some food. What's up with that? You need some water. You need some. What is that? So on the one hand, you need all this stuff that you're trying to be independent of. Do you see the dilemma here?
Yes.
Do you see the conflict? And you are conflicted as a result of that psychologically. Psychologically, all of you are in a state of pure conflict. And why? Because of this avidya, asmita, ahankara. You see, you're in the ahankara phase of this chain reaction that comes about once fundamental ignorance has set in. Now, I've said a lot already. There's a lot more to say, but do you need to process this some? Because this must not simply be listened to at the level of just academia. You follow me? I'm not here to give you academic knowledge because there's not going to be any test. This is not that kind of school. It's a school, but it's a mystery school. You see? Because you are mysteriously suffering when there's no need for that. You see? So try to understand the crux of your matter. You see? So once this ahankara arises, you see, in this process, and I'm just going through this process in a very superficial way. We'll have to have a standalone workshop, a couple of them, to really break this thing down. But I'm just glossing it, so take what I'm saying in that spirit, okay? But after this stage of a hunkara and the descent, the fall, this is your fall. You know, when you fall, you go through, there's stages in between the fall and you hitting the ground, right? Where you ain't hit the ground yet. We haven't got to the ground. You're in midair, you just fall. You're on your way, though. And we're going to get there, right? But this is the fall, the anatomy of the fall, so to speak. So you're falling into that stage of ahankara. Once ahankara has occurred, then what happens now is the rise of what they call raga and devesas, likes and dislikes. This is interesting. This is interesting. You see. Even in relationship to this world, now that you see, on one hand, I need something in here, you see? But the problem is still there because you only want those things from the world or those things in the world to happen that you like. Is that all right? So your life becomes driven by your likes and your dislikes. Now this is very interesting. Even your pursuit of pleasure is based on your raga and your devesa. Because you're never trying to find pleasure in something you don't like. To find pleasure, you must first like the object. Isn't this interesting? Is that interesting? You must like it. You like something and then you pursue it for the sake of gratification. But you like it first, you see? So you're trying to now negotiate this whole world process with the hope that you will only experience those things that you like and not have to experience those things that you dislike. So this raga and devesa becomes the dynamism, your modus operandi that drives you. You follow me? And you become locked into that. So much so, you can't do anything that you don't like. It becomes almost impossible, you see. And that becomes the problem with sadhana, right? Because you don't like this sadhana. Yes, beloved.
Okay, I'm probably already on the ground.
Yes, go ahead.
Where does will factor into this process? Because you talked to us about that at one point. And I don't even remember exactly what it was that you said, but it's something we need in terms of will in order to
Yes.
move.
Unfortunately, your will is a part of your inner organ, what we call the atakarangata, the mind. But you have to understand something. In this pursuit of pleasure in the form of your likes, you follow me? What is really happening is that the mind, manas, goes out to that object that you like. You see? Your mind only moves toward what you like. That's what it's up to. You have to understand that the function of mind is to pursue pleasure and avoid pain. That's what the mind does. That's what you're thinking about all the time. How to get a hit chick, as we call it in Sanskrit. You see? And how to avoid getting hit by some shit. You see what I'm That's all the mind is ever doing. You see, it is this fundamental activity. You see. So we have an object of the sense. I see something, right? And I like what I see. So now, what that signals to the mind is that, man, there's a possibility that I may be able to get one of my dormant desires satisfied in this moment. Are you with me? You try to have to understand that what you call your pralabdha karma is nothing but those situations you're going to have in the course of your life that provides you with an opportunity to fulfill one of these dormant sanskars or vasanas or desires that is buried in you. You see, you're nothing but a bundle of desires. That's what you are, fundamentally, right? Looking for fulfillment based on whatever conditions. That's why no matter where you're at, you're always scanning your environment, both human and otherwise, to see which one of these pleasures, which one of these desires are not fulfilled. You see? Now I'm going a little fast here, but you are fast yourself, so you should hopefully follow my argument here. Okay. So now, when the mind is the senses, the indriyas, make contact with that object, the whole of the mind goes there. The whole of the mind, you see, the manas, the buddhi, the chitta, the ahankara, they all get up and say, there's an opportunity, let's go. Your will go right there, and your will is to get this object and thus be satisfied with it. The will is hijacked. Are you with me? Are you with me? So the masters always tell us that you are a slave of your senses. Haven't all of you read that? Yes. Well, have you ever thought about what that means? Yes. Because you're not convinced you're a slave of your senses. That's the real problem here. You're really not. Because you have not really manana this, you have not really deeply reflected on it. You just accepted it as dogma, doctrine, philosophy. But you have not seen clearly. You see? You are a slave of the senses. And the senses is a slave of their objects. Now this is profound. You see, there's a physics involved here. Because the object of your senses is made out of the same stuff as your senses. So there's a natural attraction between senses and their respective objects. Are you with me? The objects are made out of what they're called the five tattvas, the mahabhutas, the tattvas. But so is your senses. Your stuff inside you is made of the same stuff outside you. And there's a natural attraction. And so when senses meet object, there's a kind of centrifugal force that pulls it. The senses are pulled to an object. You follow what I'm saying? Your eyes see that beautiful woman and Satsita almost crashes his head. You know, he pulls over, you know what I mean? Until she disappears in the horizon. You can't cut that music off in the car. You're 2 hours late to work because you can't. When the senses are pulled toward their respective objects with a centrifugal force that is nuclear. Are you following? That pulls the will and everything, you see, the whole mind. Now, once the senses is pulled to that object and becomes absorbed, it clings, you see. Upadana is what the Buddhists call it, clinging, grasping, holding on to it, you see. It connects with it, then it pulls the rest of the mind, the buddhi, the will, all of that goes there. And then consciousness itself gets dragged, you see. So there's objects that pull the senses, senses pull the intellect, and the rest of the mind stuff, the ego, and then that pulls consciousness, so the consciousness now get trapped in objects. What happens? You become identified with the objects of your senses. Now your body is an object of your senses. Are you with me? Fundamental. Right? But you can imagine, you see, people can get so trapped that they become identified with their possession. Your car becomes you. They hit your car just like they hit you. So somebody can get their ass whooped. You know what I mean? Right? Or they mess with my stuff. You know, you women, you got my stuff. Don't mess with my stuff. Your stuff becomes you through this process. Again, I am glossing it, but are you getting my point? Your question was, what happened to your will? Well, your will is gone. Just like that. Yeah. And the process of the reversal of all of that is what makes up sadhana, and hence the struggle now, you see? This pratisava, this reversal of this process, the reversal of this centrifugal movement of mind and senses and intellect and consciousness to an object has to get reversed. You see? So in that process of reversal, you see, then you got to reverse it with the same amount of force, centrifugal force now. It's the only thing that can counter centrifugal forces. Are you with me? So now you got to create some will. Are you with me? That's the purpose of meditation as well. You see, when you get up in the morning time and you sit and you're regular, you're punctual and in the same place. That's the first step in the recovery of that will, you see, to break free of that gravitational pull of senses and mind and all that into an object. Are you following my argument here? You see? And so the saints tell us the first, here's your meditation. See, everything is meditation. It's all meditation. Meditation is the only way out of your situation. There is no other way out of it. You cannot philosophize yourself out of it. You can't psychoanalyze yourself out of it. You can't do any of that. The only way out is to reverse the way you got into this mess. But first you must understand how you got into this mess in order for you to reverse. Are you with me?
Yes, sir.
So it starts with meditation, you see. And the saints say, okay, what you have to understand is that every experience is occurring within the context of time and space. All right? So the first thing you're going to have to do, you're going to have to deal with your time and your space, right? You're going to have to deal with these components first, right? You can't do anything about the effect. You got to deal with the cause. Are you with me? Now the cause of our bondage, you see, our bondage, you see, is that you're not in order. You out of ma'at, as the ancestor call it, right? So the beginning of getting into ma'at, of getting straight, starts with bringing order to your time and your location, space. So the master says, okay, you pick a time based on your circumstances. They leave that up to us, right? You go sit. You sit at the same time every day, on time, right? In the same place for the same specific amount of time. That begins to start creating will in you. You follow me? Will is really the process of detaching yourself. Virajya. You see, you start cultivating virajya, detachment. Are you with me? And what you got to get detached from is what you've been doing with your time and where you've been at. You got to bring some order in your life. So you must be punctual. You must be regular in the same place full time. Every day, day in. And it'll take you about 5 years. See, you've been thinking that it'll take you 6 months. No. So it's minimally a 5-year process. 5 years, punctual, regular, full time, same place. 5 years, and then, you know, we can move to the next level. Are you all understanding? Am I depressing you?
Yes.
You know, some of you looked at it. You thought you just had to do this, what, for 6 months? And during that 5 years, probably nothing is going to happen by way of spiritual experience. You shouldn't even expect it. Should be no expectation to make any kind of spiritual anything. You see, this is just about getting in order, getting in my heart, getting organized. You see, learning how to control that, disciplining yourself. You follow me? Cultivating virajya, detachment. You see my point? So that you can recover some of this will. You gotta, you know, disentangle yourself from your captivity to the object of your senses in order to have the freedom to seek it. Is this making sense to you?
Yes. Yes.
If you remain entangled and absorbed in the objects of your senses, how will you have the freedom?
So that's attachment, right?
Yeah, that's attachment. Yeah, attachment is the is what is being targeted. You see, and that's why your formal meditation is so important, because if you are able to recover enough will to break that attachment to what you would normally doing at 4 o'clock in the morning, you see, then that recovery of will becomes fuel now for the sadhana. You see, but there's not any way to do that just reading a book or listening to me or anybody else. You know, none of this produces that. Practice produces that, you see. So this freedom, this is Mosca. This is salvation. This is what you're looking for, you see. Try to get in touch somehow and feel within yourself the degree that you have become enslaved. You see. Look at all of the things that must be just so and so in order for you to have any degree of peace of mind. I mean, just look at your situation. So, these ragas and devesa, these likes and dislikes that arises in us as a result of our fall into the state of ahankara, creates a terrible imprisonment and enslavement for all of us. You see, it creates our prisons. You see, this inability to function beyond the limitation of your likes and your dislike is a form of imprisonment. Don't you think? Yes, it's to be in a psychological and emotional prison that you can't get out of. You see, at all. No freedom. And how can there be happiness where there's not freedom? It simply cannot happen. And then, of course, we're about to hit the ground, you see. All of this gets concretized in this body-mind complex, you see. That is more and will end. And so then we have this Abhinavesa, this sphere, not only of the ending of this body, but with the ending of this body comes the end of our ability to gratify our senses. And that combined fear it's what haunts us, you see. Remember we were saying that your fundamental fear of death is that you would lose the opportunity to gratify your senses. That's why you're afraid of death. It's also why you're afraid of life. Your fear, even in life, is the fear of the loss of any opportunity I have to gratify my senses. That's your fear. It's what keeps you from doing your sadhana. It's what keeps you from doing seva, anything connected with spiritual development and spiritual practice is constantly challenging us there. And that's the fear. I'll do a little bit, but there's a line here. But this must not be allowed to interfere with me gratifying my desires. See, you got desires. You see. In some sense, when we talk about our karma, what you're really talking about is your desires. See my point? All of us, each and every one of us, have been born with a certain history, really, of desires. That's why you got a body. The body is an instrument for the sake of the fulfillment of karma, or put another way, the body, life here in this world, is purpose to provide you with an opportunity to fulfill your desires. Boga, they call it. Are you all following?
Yes, sir.
Now, every lifetime is nothing but a selection of a group of karmas or desires that have the possibility of being fulfilled. This is called your pralabdha karma. You see, the karma that will make up this present lifetime, you see. Which really means the desires that is possible for you to fulfill in this present lifetime, you see. Doesn't guarantee they will get fulfilled, but there's a possibility. You follow me? Some of them will be, some of them won't be. So even these desires, you have to understand there are classifications or categories even of your desires. All desires are not the same. Within each individual here. You already know that in comparison to one another, you know that there's things you like that Faraji don't like. You know what I mean? Your likes and your dislikes are personal. They're relative to you. You follow me? That's why they say that an object in and of itself is not necessarily the source of pleasure. Pleasure is not something inherent in an object. It doesn't exist, you know, ontologically there. You know, there's atoms and stuff like that, but there's nothing in this thing called happiness. You know what I mean? Happiness is based on how you're relating to it. You follow what I'm saying? If happiness, pleasure was inherent in the objects, then everybody would extract the same pleasure and happiness from the same object. Are you following me? And clearly that's not the case. What dictates whether you are able to get some satisfaction from this object or that object is dependent upon your karma. Are you with me? It has nothing to do with the object, qua object. Are you all following me?
Yes.
And so your desires mimics your ragas and devesas. You see, they're relative to you. And just because you like something, it doesn't mean that anybody else should like it. But this is our attitude. I like this, and you should too. And we get into so much conflict about that, right? Because there's that ignorance, right? I mean, we don't understand this thing psychologically. You see, there is no reason on earth for anybody to like what you like. It's almost impossible. It may happen, but I mean, the chances of it happening, man, are slim. You know what I mean? It's like winning you got about as much chance of somebody liking what you like as winning the lottery. But this is your presumption. This is your expectation. You see my point? I don't like it. I don't understand why you like it. You understand? Creates a lot of problems. So you have these desires. You see, you have some desires that you're not even conscious of. This is the first thing. This is very interesting. You have desires that you're not even conscious of right now. Because desires don't even enter into your consciousness until the situations or circumstances or the conditions arises in the world that provide you with some possibility of their being satisfied. This is deep. These are called prasuptas, dormant. Unconscious. They're in the unconscious part. You're not even conscious of it. That's why you can't really even have a real good psychological sense of who you are. You don't even, I mean, it's bad enough we don't know who we are from a purely spiritual point of view. We don't even know who we are from a psychological point of view either. You know what I mean? the person, you don't know you're not experiencing the whole of your personality. You see, your personality is just a play of the manifestation and gratification of your desire. That's all your personality is. You see, but you're never experiencing all of that because most of your personality is dormant. Are y'all following me? Yes. Why I'm not getting the feeling that you following me? So the dormant desires there at the unconscious level of your being, you're not even aware of them at all. At all. Then there are another group of desires that you have. You see, these desires are there, but they're not very intense. They're in a diminished state. They're at your subconscious level. Are you with me? You follow me? They're there. You know what I mean? You have it, but you see clearly that there's no situation, circumstance, person, place, or thing available in this moment whereby I'm able to act on the fulfillment of that desire. But it's there. You know what I mean? In the subconscious. See, it's still not in the conscious, but it's there, you know. You experience that in the form of a tendency, a predisposition. You see. And of course, whenever the circumstance and situation are right, that category of desires, you know, come up into the conscious mind and are pursued. And then there's another kind of desire, category of desire. Because you thought you just had one kind of desire. No, I guess that's the point I'm trying to make you understand. No, the desires that you have in your conscious mind, that you having trouble fulfilling, that ain't nothing. You got a whole bunch more of that stuff in you see? And then there's the desires that don't have that much force and intensity yet. The Vishaniya Kama, you see, desires. Well, you could take it or you can leave it. When they come to the conscious mind, they're the desire, right? But it's not particularly intense. You could take it or you could leave it. Tea or coffee, either one is fine. I mean, you know, there's a desire, but it's not intense. You know, it can go either way. You see, it doesn't drive you, but it's there. You know, I want one or the other now. You're going to give me tea or coffee, but it doesn't matter. But I'm going to have something. You follow me? Because I'm thirsty, you know, or whatever it is, or whatever. And then, of course, there's the Udara classification of desire. Those are the ones that when they come up in the consciousness, they come up and they're intense. You know what I mean? They're intense. You drop everything. When they hit, you know what I mean? You got to move. You follow what I'm saying? You move. You see? You wake up out of sleep. I got to have me a sandwich. Zoom! You understand what I'm saying? Everything else is on hold. Are you with me? Or whatever it is. You see my point? We all know that. You follow what I'm saying? We all experience these kinds of different intensities of desires. Point I was making, however, is that these Prasuta's classification of desire, these are the ones that is buried deep down inside you, that you're sitting there and you have no idea that you have those desires whatsoever. But the moment your circumstances and situations in life is such that they are conducive for the fulfillment of those seeds, those desires, spring up out of your unconscious, into the subconscious, into the conscious mind. And very often you yourself are bewildered because you didn't know. You didn't know this about yourself. You follow what I'm saying? You see. You thought you was a nice religious man, right? That was loyal to your wife and all of that. And then, you see, you go to a strip club and one of them deep, dormant, sexual, desire, freaky stuff, bed all in you got it. And that girl hit that pole and you take all that red money. You didn't even know you had that. Dormant. Are you with me? Dormant. I'm going to come back a little bit to avidya now. But I wanted you to begin to see how some of this stuff goes here. And I know that today and under these circumstances, I'm not able to really do justice to this discussion because, you know, I'm just trying to say something that triggers some deeper reflection in you. But just like there are those different types and groups and classifications, differences in degrees of desires, there are different forms of avidya itself. Now, the first one that is what Anukasa mentioned, that form of avidya that is the non-recognition of your true self. You see, that form of avidya that makes you think you are the not self, the atman. You see, the atman is the self, the anatman is the not self. There is a level of ignorance that causes the atman to feel itself to be anatman. The self feels to be the not self. That's the first form of ignorance, avidya, or ajna, you see. And then there is another form of ignorance whereby you take that which is impermanent to be permanent. That's a kind of ignorance. Are you following me? That's a form of avidya, you see? When you relate to something being permanent that is in fact impermanent, that's avidya, don't you think? And then there's another form of avidya whereby we mistake pain for pleasure. Because we were talking about pleasure, the pursuit of pleasure, you see? But the pleasure you pursue, and you're pursuing it, mistaking that pleasure for what is really pain. This is deep. Just that one piece, we can go to the library next week. And somebody give me about 6 hours of time in the library and go deep. Because, that we don't gloss that one, because that hits us where we live. But that's a form of avidya. It is the mistaking of pain for pleasure. And then there's a fourth kind of form of avidya, which is mistaking the unreal for the real. Now there are more, but these are the four fundamental forms of avidya, and we all suffer from them. So when we talk about overcoming our ignorance, you have to understand that you have to deal with at least these four to even get to the other ones. There are some other ones, you see. But if you get these four, you'll be in a position to deal with the other ones. Are you all following me here? So the purpose of sadhana, meditation, spiritual practice is to overcome these forms of avidya. Are you with me? This avidya that results in us taking the self to be the not self. You see? And this avidya that causes us to presume that what is impermanent is permanent, and so forth and so on. All of those kinds of avidyas, you see, are responsible for our whole pursuit of pleasure in the first place, you see. Because the true self has no need to fulfill any desires of the senses. The individual self has that problem. Are you with me? Atman don't have that problem. Pure self don't have that problem. Because there's no unhappiness, there's no dissatisfaction, there's no incompleteness, there's nothing that needs to be added to its experience at all. So hence it has no desires. Nirvana. All desires have ceased. They don't even exist. Desires arises with the asmita, this form of avidya that causes the self to become identified with the not self, i.e. the body, mind, blah, 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 blah. Then desires arise, you see, of all those varieties that we mentioned. Prior to that, there's no need for that thing. Now, I'm saying all of this because what very often is passes for spiritual practice, and what passes for the sadhana and the spiritual process is us fighting with these effects of ignorance. Are you with me? There's an effect of ignorance, right? And you're trying to figure out, well, how can I resolve this suffering, or how can I resolve this problem, or how can I overcome this deficit in myself, and blah, 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 and you're in there, and you're involved in a psychological struggle with all of this. That's futile. You have to deal with the cause. The cause is your ignorance. You see? I'm trying not to be selfish. Okay, you ain't gonna never succeed. Because your selfishness is an effect of your ignorance. And it cannot be disappeared. It cannot be dealt with. You follow what I'm saying? The saints say that, okay, don't even try that. What you do, try to at least just, control it a little bit, but don't think that you're going to solve it. Go do this meditation. You see? That's what you got to deal with. But we won't do the meditation. I'm going to make an appointment with Sat Rod and see if he can help me overcome my selfish impulses. You know what I mean? You see? How to adjust me to reality. But here's the problem. The reality of the psychoanalyst and the psychiatrist is not reality itself. The reality that psychiatrists and psychologists is trying to get you to adjust to is a reality that is made up of your sense perceptions and social norms and so forth, none of which is reality. At all. It's just more craziness. That's why you get no relief. You're being adjusted to that which is unreal. You all are not following me because I don't see no hair standing on your head. You know what I mean? Somebody's hair should be standing on your head. Somebody say amen. Siddhartha wants to weigh in. Go sit down.
First of all, thanks for messing up business. I said, well, I have to talk to you about that. But, so going back a little bit towards the fall, when you first started, what role, when you talk about the spiritual schizophrenia, I was really feeling you on that. So in the basic sense, because trying to be an individual and trying to be loved, I felt you on that. for me, not my clients.
Good.
What role in the basic sense does meditation play in resolving that? Because that was, that's
Sure. Again, and that's a good question, beloved. Again, meditation has as its ultimate aim and purpose the dispelling of ignorance of these avidyas. And with the dispelling of these avidyas, that ends. You follow what I'm saying? Altogether, you see. Because almost all pursuit of love at the level of individuality is selfish. It is never about the other person. It is always about you and making yourself. So it's not even love. You see?
why you said trying to get love. You didn't say trying to love. You said we're trying to get love.
Yeah, you're trying to get loved. Yeah, you're trying to be loved. You follow what I'm saying? And that's the whole enterprise. That's the only enterprise of any individuated jiva. Jiva is the term they use for the individuated sense of being separate. The jiva. But the jiva, the ego, the jiva, what it is up to is always selfish by definition. You follow what I'm saying? It's just trying to get pleasure. That's all your mind can do. You follow what I'm saying? It's seek pleasure.
So that we overcome is for them to be the individual to begin with. That's the only way to resolve that.
There's no other way, because that whole problem is the result of being in that individuated stage of the fall. And so you must overcome that. And so the mystics say that the only way, again, that we can solve all of these struggles and problems is that you must get knowledge. You see? You must understand. You see? There must be the conquest of this ignorance. You see? You'll see, for instance, beloved, in the process, a lot of emphasis is put on the cultivation of avika. You see? Avika generates the Varajya and blah, 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 blah. You know the 8 limbs of yoga from Sage Patanjali and so forth and so on. It's to increase this esoteric knowledge. You see my point? And to understand, you know, the importance of meditation. You see, once you understand the importance of meditation, once you see how meditation works and all of this thing, then that becomes your primary occupation, because you understand there is no way to alter an effect without dealing with the cause of the effect. And the cause of that schizophrenia is avidya. You see my point? Because when you are the total self, when there's, for instance, no presumption of being separate anymore, where there's only the experience of oneness, you see my point? You are the other person. There's not that distinction anymore. You follow what I'm saying? So you're not trying to union with anything, because everything is already you. What is there to union with? You follow me? There's identity. You see, real love is identity. Real love is the experience of being that includes every other thing. It's hard to explain it, but are you following me a little bit?
And that's what also suffering, because it's suffering when you try to live like that.
Mm-hmm. Split.
You know?
Yeah.
And so that suffering, you know, that
Yeah.
grace of suffering that you talked about years ago,
Mm-hmm,
when I
mm-hmm.
first heard it, but when you live and you experience, and it, you know, something like trying to live like that, in
Mhm.
my case, or experience, now it becomes real.
Becomes real for you, and that's good. You see, and you're fortunate. You see, because there's always the possibility that that would have never happened.
Yeah.
You see, there's always that. So this meditation is the only means by which these fourfold forms of avidya can be overcome, and thus liberate you from those classifications of the karma, that is desires, you see. But when we begin to reframe how we actually see ourselves, I know we see ourselves as these bodies, but these bodies have been formed and fashioned out of your desires, like a bee fashions a honeycomb. So have your karma, your desires fashioned this body. That particular body has been fashioned out of those desires, that karma. It made that body. It made it male, or it made it female, it made it black. You know what I mean? It has created all of that. Your body is an instrument made by your prarabdha karma for the sake of the fulfillment of your dormant desire that you didn't get a chance to finish off in a previous birth. That's all this body is. And what happened is that you will go on. What happened is that this body gets worn out in that process of trying to fulfill these desires that are your prarabdha. It wears this body out. That's death. You see my point? And it wears this body out trying to fulfill those desires. And here's the problem, that in the process of trying to fulfill these desires that make up your prarabdha karma, there's kriyaman karma. You create more desires. And you already understand the process. The world is purposed to fulfill all your desires, but the world is on its own timetable. Are you with me? So you have a desire, right, to be married, right? And let's say the circumstances around you is such that that desire can't be fulfilled now. Are you with me? Because the circumstances for its fulfillment is not available to you. Are you with me? Now that desire becomes sentient. You know what I mean? It goes into a storehouse, right? You see? And of course you would live out that lifetime fulfilling whatever desire that the conditions, circumstances of that lifetime will permit. All of the desires that the circumstances and conditions of that lifetime that is not capable of being fulfilled gets stored in you, right? Then you take another birth, right? And now you make another body, right? But now the universe done caught up. You know that desire you had, Siddhanta, 10 lifetimes ago? Well, here's your chance. And we're going to fulfill it. So it'll rise up a condition, right? That dormant thing will come out. It will manifest itself, right? But now you got a wife and shit. You don't want a wife this lifetime. I thought y'all forgot about me. See, we move on. We done created some new desires. But you forgot you had that old desire. The universe don't forget that, right? So it makes a body and it makes people in your life. You know what I mean? It creates all of that, okay? It's going to create this and this for you. You're going to have a wife this time. You're going to have 12 kids this time. Because you wanted a lot of kids and a wife. So here you go. That's the law of karma. You see? So the karma that gets fulfilled in a given lifetime that is delayed fulfillment is experienced by you as devesa, stuff you don't like. The stuff that's happening to you that you don't like is the fruition of karma and desires you had in a previous birth, but you done moved on. But they gonna happen. Because you be wondering why all this shit happening to you. You wanted it to happen to you. It's just that the universe works slow. It's gonna get to you, man. You have to understand this thing. You have to understand this thing. So there's nothing happening to you, whether in terms of likes and dislikes, that wasn't priorly your own desire. Let's see. Yes, for them. Yes. You scared? Go right ahead, beloved. And then we won't forget there was a question back there. Who had a question? Okay, Bakara, you remember that and all of that. Yes, beloved.
What, can you place the desire for God with meditation? I mean, is there the desire for God, is that real as well as the rest of this outside of it?
All of that. In fact, one of the strategies on the path is the practice of bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga means that you realize, okay, I've been generating all these desires, and I understand the law of karma now. You see how every one of them going to go, right? So I might as well create those kinds of desires that will liberate me, right? So bhakti yoga becomes a disciplining of redirecting your desires. You see? It's a redirection of them. Because you're in this universe, it's gonna work. You see? Seek and ye shall find. That's the law. It will happen. It may not happen in this lifetime, though. You follow what I'm saying? So even you may find, beloved, that desire that you begin to cultivate for God. And you may find yourself in a situation in your present lifetime where that desire could not get fulfilled. You could not get in a monastery. You couldn't do it, whatever it is, right? 3 or 4 lifetimes later, that desire will arise when the times are correct. You see my point? And you will pursue that, right? Now, it may be that you might have changed, though. See, that's always possible, you know. We do that even now, right? One day we really want God, and the next day we want man. So that also happens. You follow what I'm saying? You get in that monastery, and now you say, man. See, I don't know how I got it. But you know, you're gonna be born to a preacher. Your mama be a preacher, your daddy be a preacher, and you just say, man, I can't wait to get out of this house. You know what I mean? I hate going to church. But you had a desire to go to church. What is that? You see? So it's very complex, you see. But yes, beloved, this desire for freedom, for liberation. Because when we say the desire for God, that's really what it's all about, isn't it? You see, this quest for God eventually matures and becomes bhakti yoga. You see, initially the quest for God that you all have is just another way of getting more pleasure. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's all right. Let it be so. But it will grow. You follow me? Because in the end, everybody's is moving in the same direction. Much more can be said about it, you see. But you do see those rare individuals born into this life where that desire has come up. You see, everybody deep down has a desire for God, but it's so dormant. See, it's one of the desires, it's the last one down there. You know what I mean? But it's in line, but it's the last in line. You see, but eventually, over lifetimes and lifetimes, as the other ones get exhausted and provided no new ones are piled back on and rises to the top. It moves from the unconscious into the subconscious. You know what I mean? And at the unconscious level, you begin to stir because you begin to see and feel that this ain't enough. There's something missing here. This can't be at all. You follow what I'm saying? That's the percolation of this mumukshava, this thing, something in you. You know, this ain't enough. It's got to be more to life than this here. You know what I mean? Blah, blah, blah. But it's subconscious. You understand what I'm saying? It's not, it's vague. You follow what I'm saying? It keeps moving. Another lifetime, perhaps maybe this lifetime, and then it breaks into consciousness. You know what I mean? And then suddenly on that day that it merges into consciousness, everything is dropped. Peter happened to you. Nets drop. You follow what I'm saying? You see, you walk off of the farm and you follow the tathagata. Just gone. It's just sudden. What happened to Mirabah happens to you. What happened to Rumi happens suddenly. You follow me? In Zen, that's why they say it comes suddenly. Right. One day you were trying to make $1 million, the next day you're Francis of Assisi. Because that divine urge has surfaced and you move. You follow me? And you go through that process, you see. You go through that process because you are being pulled. There's a centrifugal force that pulls the soul out of its enslavement, pulling it back. God is pulling all of that back to itself. You see, soul belongs to God. That centrifugal force is pulling it. You see, it just takes time because you're in time. You see, but at some point, that demi-urge arises in you, and then you're gone. You see, and who can explain it? You see my point? Many of us, you really can't explain it. You know what I mean? I mean, look around the room. I mean, half of us are criminals. You know what I mean, how is this? You know, because we were supposed to be in jail, and we was all right with that. You know, but then suddenly you hear something, and it happens strange. You hear something, you see something, and it triggers. You know, there was that event in your experience that were conducive to the rise of that, and it triggers it, and it comes up, and now suddenly, you know what I mean? You're in an entirely different pursuit. Life is shifted, you know what I mean? And said Rob wanted to be a pimp. He had red eyes. Had him a pimp hat, pimp club, pimp mobile, walk like a pimp. He had a cane, you know, they call him TC. Am I lying? Something happened. We don't even know how it happened. It just happened. Something triggered it one day, you see? And then he wanted to become Buddha. Kabir, you know what I mean? And that was it, strange. Came back and told you, you need to stop all of this. And, right? But that's how it goes for all of us. Who can explain it? It is inscrutable. You follow what I'm saying? It's incomprehensible. It is a great mysterious phenomenon that brings us to the path. Strange. You see? Strange. Bakare, you can have the last word, beloved.
Yes, sir. I believe Solomon in the Bible said to seek knowledge, seek this path is filled with sorrow and pain. Why is that?
Well, it's
If I can
because...
go, I feel that.
Because, beloved, there's a birth happening. In the Bible, the talk says that you must be born again. Well, any birth process is going to involve a lot of pain and suffering. You just can imagine, of course, you may not be able to remember it, but even when we were born, you know, you had to come down that fallopian tube in your mother, that head of yours had to be squeezed. You have no idea of the pressure. In fact, in some therapies, we try to treat birth trauma because we know that a child being born, just coming into the world, just coming down that fallopian tube, being squeezed is traumatic. And sometimes that shows up in the form of their engrams, these deep-seated memories. They don't even know what's going on, you see? A lot of the phobias, claustrophobia, fears of height, all these kind of things are associated with birth trauma. Are you with me? Well, in spiritual rebirth, there's some suffering. You see? There's some pain. And necessarily because there must be purgation first. There must be a purification process. And the process of purification is always painful. Are you with me? Because we reverse in directions. Remember? We've been outward going, now we reverse in that direction, you see? So that reversal of the direction of our attention from its entrapment in the object of the senses, that reverse process is painful. It's like peeling your skin off of you. That's the analogy the mystics give. Because you become fully fused with it. You follow me? And it's like peeling your skin off. It's a very painful process. Although in the beginning stages, see, beloved, we all come to the path and we're full of all that kind of enthusiasm. All of us are, you know what I mean? We're so excited, we're so happy because the thing is new. It's like falling in love again. You know how when you fall in love with God, it's pretty much the same way it is when you fall in love with a woman and a man. Everything is rosy, romantic, honeymoon, and then the honeymoon ends. So the honeymoon period of our becoming lovers of God ends. And then another reality sets in. So there's two aspects. One is the initial burst of enthusiasm and excitement and all of that, you know? And then when that phase passes, you know what I mean? After you find out, some years go by, right? And you've been getting up and you've been doing your meditation and you've been doing all that, and nothing has changed. Not one bit. You follow me? Because as I said earlier, we usually come to the path as another strategy to get pleasure. You follow what I'm saying? But what we find out is that this meditation and all the things that we're instructed to do, none of that is giving pleasure to the ego. Are you with me? Are you with me?
Yes.
We came to the path looking for a way to find a higher pleasure for our ego, only to find out that all of the disciplines associated with sadhana and spiritual practice is counter-egoic. It is not giving the ego any pleasure. Now, the ego didn't sign up for this, right? Right?
That's right.
And it becomes more and more difficult now because we know that the pleasure we get from the gratification of our senses with their respective objects, that's immediate, you know. But this pleasure that I thought I was going to get from sadhana, this is not no immediate pleasure. The book said maybe down the road and all that stuff. You follow me? And now it becomes difficult, you see. It's the case with everybody, you see. And so you into that process. You follow me? And at some point, beloved, you will want to quit. Everybody will want to quit. It's that dark night because this is suffering. Whenever you're doing something and you're not getting any pleasure from it, that's suffering for you, right? It goes against your whole egoic structure and ambition. The ego is not interested in doing nothing where it's not getting some pleasure. But this thing, you're doing it and you're not getting no pleasure. How long can you do that? With enthusiasm. You see? A few months. You see? But in any case, at some point in your career, you're going to feel like quitting because you're not getting no pleasure out of this here. You're suffering. You follow me? You're doing something that is not giving you pleasure, and that is what suffering is, you see? And yet, somehow or another, with understanding, you have to be able to persist. You have to be able to persist and keep at it, and keep at it, and keep at it, and keep at it. Understanding. You see my point? That in the beginning is exciting, then quickly thereafter, it is all hell. All suffering. You see? Dry, boring, all of that. You see? That's how it is. That's how it goes. You see? That's the process. But that will end. You see, I used to always say, like, it's digging a tunnel. You're digging a tunnel, you're digging a tunnel, you can't see nothing. You're just digging, and you're just digging, and you're just digging, you see? But you got to keep going. You see? And then he says, that last scratch, you see, didn't like break. So there's a story that comes out of the devotional tradition in India, the Shiva tradition, beloved. And it is about this disciple that goes to the Swami at the temple and tells the Swami that he really wants to have the darshan of Shiva. You see, in India, the word for in India, people go to have darshan. They go to see something. Like in the West, you come to hear something. In the East, it's to see the truth, not just to hear the truth. They call that darshana. So you go to the temple for darshan of the deity. You know what I mean? You want to see Shiva or Vishnu or whatever the deity of the temple is that you're worshiping. So he went to this Shiva temple and he talked to the mahant there, the priest there, so forth, and said, I'm longing for the darshan of Shiva. You know, what must I do? Yeah. And he said, okay, here's the sadhana. If done, will produce the darshan of Shiva for you. He says, what you have to do, you have to come to the temple on a 108 times and bring water to wash the murti of Shiva, the linga, you see. If you're familiar with Hindu worship, they wash, they bathe, they put flowers and food and all that, you see. So, but you must bring this water 108 days in a row. Well, this man lived quite a distance from that temple, right? And in those days, you know, the water had to be carried on your head in a big pot, you know what I mean? And so this was quite an undertaking for him. It was a real tapasya, you know, you see? Because some tapasya has to be done. And so he would get the water and then he would make the trek, this long trek to the temple. And he would bathe the linga of Shiva, you know what I mean? Wait for the darshan, no darshan. And he would repeat it the next day. Same thing, you know what I mean? Then the next day, same thing, nothing is happening, you know. He's not even coming and doing this for quite a while here now, you follow what I'm saying? And he ain't seeing nothing, just like us. You know, you've been sitting, seeing nothing. You know what I mean? I ain't gonna sit tomorrow. See, so he was like us, you know what I mean? He'll watch that linga, then he'd sit there, you know, waiting for his darshan to rise up. And none is happening here. And so he keeps going though, he keeps going, he keeps going, he keeps going, and he keeps sitting, and he's seeing nothing, and this time is going by, you know what I mean? He's getting old, he could have been doing all other kinds of things, you know. You know how the mind style reasons. And he got to he made it all the way up to 107 times. He made his 107th trip. You know what I mean? He didn't want to make it. He didn't want to go, but he said, shit. You know? And he went, because he was hoping. And he wanted to just see if there was any hope. And he poured that water, no darshan. And he said, the hell with this. And he stopped this practice. And he went back to the Swami and said, man, I give up, I forget it. You know what I mean? I done did this, I done bought 107 pails of water to perform the ritual and so forth. He said, and nothing happened, no sign, no nothing, he says. And the Swami said to him, he said, it's amazing. If you had came just one more time, it would have happened. You see? And he said, what is amazing is that you could do something 107 times, but you couldn't do it one more time. That, you see? This ability to do it one more time is what it takes on this path. One more time. You know, I've been meditating for 15 years, regular, punctual, nothing is happening. You see? Can you do it 15 more? So that's how it is, you see. That's how it goes. So that's a lot of psychological suffering, bodily suffering, but this is what the price is that you have to pay. And you see, beloved, for those who bhakti has really grown in them. Mukherjee was asking about that role that love for God plays, that desire. When the desire for God is intense, you see my point? When there is no other option. You feel what I'm saying? There is no turning back. There is no stopping. Stopping and going to what? There's nothing left. You follow me? There is no life to return to. Your vavika, your understanding, have reached a level where you see this is all maya. This is all futile. This whole pursuit of the pleasures of the world is futile. You see, you fulfill a pleasure, you get some satisfaction, and then immediately you experience sorrow at the loss of the pleasure. You see, consequences. Are you with me? There's a consequence for everything. You probably never thought about the fact that there's a consequence for the gratification of your senses for the sake of pleasure. There's a consequence for that. The consequence is sorrow. You follow what I'm saying? The consequence is now you got to do this again and again and again until the body wear out. Well, the Bhakti has seen all of this. So their desires for God is so intense that the possibility of turning back does not exist. You follow me? And they will persist in that pursuit of God, you see, until God is attained or they die, whichever comes first. But there's never any question of turning around. Gone too far, the old folks say, to turn around. You see? More can be said about that. He had the last word. Do you have something else?
Yeah, I want to say, beloved,
Real
so
quickly.
just leads us to the conclusion to keep knocking at God's door.
Knocking you in the door till open.
Might knock 1,000 times, still won't get let in, but
It's all right. Love will make you knock that 1,000 times. That's why love ultimately is the most important ingredient in our spiritual sadhana. Sadhana without love is not sadhana that's going to last. How could it? You follow me?
Yeah.
You'll run out of psychological reasons for practicing, intellectual reasons. You'll run out of that early. Are you with me?
yes,
And as your body get older, you'll run, you won't be strong in the body, you got aches and pains, so comfort is gonna grow. You follow me? Move, all those things are not gonna be able to finance or fuel this process for the length of time that it requires of us, you see. So when you hit your bump, and everybody hit a bump at different times, it depends on how intense your practice was. If you've been regular and punctual and full time, okay, you'll hit that bump quicker. For those who've been superficial, lackadaisical, it's going to take you a longer time to reach that same point of the dark night of the soul. But everybody's going to have to go through. Just read the literature of these great realizers. The Buddha, Mahavir, Kabir, Dadu, Guru Nanak. I mean, you read their life. That wasn't no piece of cake. Are you feeling me? Those men and women, they went through hell. You see? Tukaram had to watch his 2 kids die of starvation. You understand what I'm saying? You know the story of Job? You're a Bible student. You follow what I'm saying? That ain't no piece of cake. You see? But their mumukshava, their bara, their bhakti was intense. They weren't playing. There wasn't no other way for this here. You follow me? You have to have that same quality. You follow what I'm saying? You're not going to be exempt. There ain't nothing special about you. What's special about you? What's so special about you that you should be exempt from the tapas? You see? In the Upanishad, when the disciple comes and have sessions with the guru, you see, the rishi, and he goes over their sadhana, and almost always the remedy is go and do more tapasya. That's the instruction. Go do more meditation. Go do more meditation. Go do more meditation. You see? I used to always wonder, why am I not just saying that? But as you mature, you begin to understand. What else is there to say? Go do more meditation, dissolve this ignorance, and your problems disappear. You see? It ain't like, let's examine your potty training. You see? Let's see what your early childhood trauma and how we can readjust you and recover in you the ability to trust other people. And let's play this game of adjusting you to social standards. You know what happened? You adjust a person to the standards of society. You just have been responsible for this person's permanent insanity, haven't you?
Yes.
So the mystics don't play that game. It's the tapasa. Go do some more meditation. Go do some more meditation. Meditation, meditation. Meditation is the panacea. It is the cure for all of what you're suffering from. You see? But you got to have that stuff in you. That's why they say the path is not for no punk. It's not for the lighthearted, the non-serious person. We have other contexts for you. Are you with me? This is for grown folks. You see, this is grown folks stuff, And there's something in you that has to be grown, you see. And if it's there, you go through it, you see. Because what else you going to do? What else you going to do? it becomes very hard once your vika reaches the point where you realize that there's no real pleasure in that object. Once that becomes a reality for you, the mind can't pursue that which it really is not convicted will make it happy. It can't do it. It's not even structured to do it. Just like you can't stop it from pursuing that which is convinced is real. In the same way, once the mind is convinced this ain't real, there's no way for the mind to run back to that. No way. But it's a process, you see. All right, we'll check them out.
my